Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we plunge into complex topics, distill the most critical insights, and try to make sense of the world, one stack of sources at a time.
Great to be here.
Today we're focusing on a nation known for its vibrant spirit and incredible resilience, South Africa.
Yeah.
Yet it's grappling with a challenge that casts a really long, dark shadow. Corruption. I mean, imagine this. For 9.1% of South Africans, corruption isn't just some abstract political issue. It's the second most pressing problem they face, right behind unemployment.
Yeah, that's a truly striking fact, isn't it?
It really is.
That number just underscores the profound, tangible impact this has on the everyday lives of millions. It turns abstract policy into, very real hardship and despair.
Absolutely. So to really grasp the scale of South Africa's challenge, we need to understand not just what's happening today, but its deep systemic roots and, the broader implications.
Right.
Our mission in this deep dive is to pull back the curtain on the pervasive nature of corruption and organized crime within the country.
And we're drawing from some incredibly detailed sources today. We've got an extensive corruption in South Africa overview, a really in-depth strategic organized crime risk assessment report.
Okay.
And we're going to weave in some maybe surprisingly relevant insights from an article called New York's Socialist Temptation. Young People's Idealism Ignores Economics.
Interesting mix.
It is. And that risk assessment report, it doesn't pull any punches. It emphasizes that organized crime is nothing less than an existential threat to South Africa's democratic institutions, economy, and people.
Wow. An existential threat.
That's a powerful statement. It really frames the scale of the challenge.
It certainly does. It drives home the severity. So, to understand how South Africa got here, we need to look back a bit at the historical context. Before 1994, in the apartheid era, the civil service itself was used as a vehicle for what's called rent-seeking.
Right, using public office for private gain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Using public office or resources for personal benefit, not public good. And, preferential treatment for the Afrikaner minority was baked in.
So government contracts, funding for state-owned enterprises, the parastatals.
Yep, they often flowed exclusively to Afrikaner businesses. We even saw major scandals back then, like Muldergate, that involved illicit use of government funds for propaganda.
And it's interesting, the sources note that during the anti-apartheid struggle, the ANC, the African National Congress, received foreign funding, but there were apparently no reports or evidence of corruption tied to that period.
That's a key distinction historically.
It is. However, the post-apartheid period saw a profound and troubling shift, particularly during Jacob Zuma's presidency, that's 2009 to 2018. Corruption didn't just appear, it became alarmingly rampant.
Rampant.
Yeah, it seeped into nearly all government departments, intelligence agencies, the police, even the military. This pervasive rot just eroded public trust at every level.
And the public definitely feels it. I mean, our sources show that a huge majority, 60.5% of South Africans, believe their government is doing very badly at fighting corruption.
60%? That's massive.
And get this. For the first time in 2023-2024, the country's Corruption Perceptions Index actually dropped below the global average.
Oof. That signals a deeply concerning systemic issue, doesn't it? Not just, a few isolated incidents.
Exactly. So when we look at the types, the mechanisms of this corruption, what stands out?
Well, three forms really jump out from the sources. There's wasteful expenditure, just outright state capture.
State capture, okay.
And maybe most controversially, corruption that was sort of facilitated by legislation originally intended for positive social change, specifically Black Economic Empowerment, or BE.
BE. And its successor, Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment, BBBE. Now, these policies were designed to address historical inequalities, right? Ensure broader participation in the economy.
That was the goal, yes. But, as the sources highlight, they were tragically co-opted.
Yeah.
Co-opted how? I know Moletsi Mbeki, for instance, argued BEE became the single biggest driver of corruption in South Africa. That's a strong claim.
It is, and the mechanism, these requirements intended to foster inclusivity were unfortunately weaponized. They were used to improperly award government contracts, often at vastly inflated prices,
Right.
to politically connected individuals. They even coined a term for them, tenderpreneurs.
Tenderpreneurs, a mix of tender and entrepreneur.
Exactly. Individuals exploiting government tenders for personal profit, often corruptly, blurring those lines between business and political influence.
So it didn't just fuel corruption.
No, it also severely reduced economic growth and, sadly, increased unemployment. It actually undermined the very goals the legislation was supposed to achieve.
And a prime example, probably the most egregious example of this state capture, has to be the Gupta family scandal, right?
Absolutely. The Public Protector's 2016 State of Capture report laid it out. It detailed how this family allegedly wielded immense influence over cabinet appointments.
Cabinet appointments, wow.
Yes. Secured unlawful state contracts, got preferential bank treatment, and former President Jacob Zuma's own profound conflict of interest was absolutely central to this whole network.
The scale of that scandal is just staggering.
It really is. The report indicated the Gupta family financed the Zuma family directly. South African authorities are still trying to recover an estimated $4.07 billion lost to these deals.
$4 billion.
Yeah, it was a textbook illustration of how personal interests, when they're unchecked, can completely subvert and hollow out public institutions' democratic processes, all for private gain.
And the hits just kept coming, didn't they? Over the last decade into the 2020s, we've seen so many high-profile cases showing this systemic rot.
That's right. You think of the Ray Dairy Project, almost all its R$250 million desire, meant for poverty alleviation, stolen, implicated the Guptas, ace Magashul.
Then there was the R$255 million asbestos contract scandal, also involving Magashul. Payments made to third parties on his instruction, but the work was never done.
And we can't forget the collapse of VBS Mutual Bank, a regional bank, popular, completely plundered by fraud and corruption, left thousands of ordinary depositors devastated.
Just heartbreaking.
Or the Bosasa bribes. This private security company paying massive kickbacks to government officials, it led to the tragic deaths of the CEO, Gavin Watson, and 2 liquidators investigating the company.
And even during the pandemic.
Yes, COVID-19 related corruption. The Digital Vibes scandal, where the health minister, Zwelian Kais, was implicated in awarding a communications tender to family members at inflated rates.
You know, these aren't just headlines. As you said, these are real impacts on people's lives. It's a wholesale theft of state resources.
Precisely.
And this pervasive corruption, it naturally leads us to its terrifying connection with organized crime.
The nexus, yeah.
Corruption isn't just a side effect here. It actively, deeply embeds organized crime within state institutions.
Yeah.
Especially law enforcement.
That's a crucial point. Small bribes buy protection, impunity for criminals on the ground, but high-level corruption. That can turn state actors into active participants, even direct stakeholders in illicit markets.
It's a deliberate subversion of the state's role.
Absolutely. It flips the script. And South Africa, as one source starkly puts it, is awash with guns.
Awash with guns.
The report clearly links institutional corruption, particularly within the police service and the Central Firearms Registry, naming officials like Christian Lodewijk Prinsloo to the illicit diversion of both civilian and state-issued guns.
And that leads to?
Well, this flood of illegal firearms has directly contributed to a surge in gang violence since about 2009. And chillingly, the professionalization of violence for hire, contract killings are now a readily available service.
That is genuinely chilling. And this professionalization, it extends to organized violence, right? Targeted assassinations becoming an accepted tool of business.
Tragically, yes. It blurs the lines between political actors, economic actors, and purely criminal actors. Think of Charles Kinnear, the police detective investigating gun syndicates, murdered.
And Babita Deokaran.
The whistleblower who exposed massive PPE corruption in the health department, brutally silenced. And the sources often mention the sinister role of hitmen from the taxi industry in these killings. It creates this climate of fear where speaking out could literally cost you your life.
Unbelievable. And then there's this dramatic expansion of extortion, these so-called business forums.
Ah, yes, the 30%ers. These groups demand 30% of contract values from construction projects. They often cite a specific government procurement regulation about local content.
A regulation meant to empower local businesses.
Exactly. But now it's twisted into a tool for criminal extortion. And we're not talking small shakedowns. This involves armed intimidation.
The financial impact must be huge.
Massive. Our $63 billion in affected projects are $40.7 billion in national losses. And there are alleged links between political actors in these forums. Notorious groups like Boko Haram and Schwan are mentioned for their violent tactics. It's a fundamental breakdown of the rule of law.
Just pure criminality, enabled by the system.
And these criminal activities, they extend to preying on critical public services, too. It cripples the state's ability to provide for its citizens even further.
Like the railways.
Exactly. PRASA, the National Rail Agency, terminated private security in late 2019. Then came the COVID lockdowns. It created this massive window of opportunity. Over 80% of railway stations were vandalized. Astronomical losses. Commuter lines vital for millions were effectively shut down, stripped bare.
It's not just railways, is it?
No. We're seeing rampant copper theft hitting electricity infrastructure. ESCOM, the power utility, loses billions. Cable theft is a daily occurrence, contributing to the blackout.
Water infrastructure, too.
Also targeted. Pumps, pipelines, even manhole covers stolen. And alarmingly, corruption in the water sector itself has led to some villages being deliberately denied piped water.
Why would they do that?
So corrupt officials can profit from expensive water deliveries by truck. The Gianni project is a case in point. Costs skyrocketed from R$500 million to R$3 billion before the whole thing collapsed, leaving communities high and dry. Literally.
That's just profoundly cynical.
Beyond this direct theft, there's also a troubling increase in big economic and financial crime, large-scale corporate fraud.
Like Steinhoff.
VBS Mutual Bank again, EOH. The reports note these aren't just one-off bad actors anymore. It involves a much wider group of people acting in concert, systematically exploiting weaknesses in governance.
And the scale.
Immense. Steinhoff's fictitious and irregular transactions alone hit our $106 billion.
Our $106 billion. It's hard to even comprehend these numbers. As we dissect all this systemic decay, the preying on public resources, it really forces us to ask broader questions, doesn't it, about how economies are structured and governed.
It really does.
And what I find particularly fascinating looking at this is how it seems to echo insights from that unexpected source you mentioned, the article about New York City's socialist temptation.
Right. And it's interesting because without endorsing any specific political ideology here, the article from the American Institute for Economic Research, AIER, it offers a critique that, when you hold it up against South Africa's experience, highlights some potentially universal lessons.
Okay, like what?
Well, the article asserts, quite bluntly, that socialism never delivers what it promises. It quotes Lord Young, maybe hyperbolically, but to make a point saying it bends with people having to eat their own pets. A stark way of saying things can go terribly wrong with absolute state control.
Kai, strong words.
Yeah, and it also argues that a system relying heavily on state power relies on bureaucracy, and the bureaucrats quickly become a new ruling class. This, the argument goes, can restrict freedom and pit communities against each other.
And the economic pitfalls.
The article mentions things like soaking the rich doesn't work because higher earners might just relocate, leading to brain drain. And you can certainly see parallels, or at least resonance, with some of South Africa's economic struggles amid all this corruption and a shrinking tax base.
I see the connection.
Exactly. And it discusses the inherent challenges of state-run enterprises, referencing failed city-run grocery stores in the U.S., even Venezuela's nightmare of shortages and bureaucracy. The point being, they often struggle against the efficiency of established private chains.
So how does this connect back specifically to South Africa beyond those general points?
Well, what's fascinating, and I think quite powerful, is that South Africa's experience with state capture, these patronage networks, the politically motivated tenderpreneurs, it serves as a vivid, real-world case study. It demonstrates how unchecked bureaucracy, distorted economic incentives, and extensive state involvement, if not meticulously governed, can tragically undermine prosperity and foster widespread corruption.
Regardless of the specific political label you put on it.
Precisely. The source notes, knowledge is most valuable when understood and applied. And this South African experience really seems to demonstrate the potential dangers highlighted in that AIER critique, playing out in real time.
Okay, so given all this, what does it mean for South Africa's path forward? Steps have been taken, right?
Yes, definitely. There have been initiatives like the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, set up in 2018. It did a rigorous investigation into state capture during the Zuma years.
And it produced results.
Yes. It meticulously exposed widespread corruption, implicated major players like Bosasa and Bain and Company. It provided a really comprehensive roadmap for potential reform. Foreign embassies even issued warnings that unaddressed corruption would hit future investment, adding external pressure.
Despite those efforts.
Despite those significant efforts and the Zondo Commission's robust findings, public perceptions of corruption, as we saw with that index number, continued to deepen. The core challenges remain pretty formidable. Well, law enforcement agencies, the very bodies needed to fight this, have been described as hollowed out, hemorrhaging expertise. often due to political interference, internal purges.
So the capacity just isn't there.
It's severely weakened. Arrest and prosecution rates for these complex cases are actually declining. There's a chronic lack of expertise within key institutions to tackle sophisticated financial crimes. Even with new laws like the Cybercrimes Act, successful implementation, and maybe more crucially effective international cooperation are proving incredibly difficult.
So ultimately, combating this level of corruption, getting to the root of it,
Yeah.
it sounds like it requires a monumental effort.
Absolutely. Reforming all the affected institutions, instituting practices that actually prevent personal interests from warping public service.
Which means
It means appointments based on merit, not partisanship. That's a fundamental shift. Easier said than done, of course, but completely essential if the country is to move forward.
it's about rebuilding trust and competence, isn't it, from the ground up?
Exactly that.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to ponder. Given the clear, painful evidence from South Africa that unchecked power and distorted economic incentives can lead to these profound societal costs, this breakdown of public trust, what responsibility do individuals and communities actually have in demanding and upholding true accountability, irrespective of the specific system in place, to ensure that the promise of progress doesn't just dissolve into a widespread erosion of prosperity and freedom?